Ooh, I like the background. It's good.
Hi there.
Hi.
Welcome to another edition of Cambridge Inside Out. My name is Robert Winters.
And I'm Judy Nathans.
Welcome again. This is actually our week 2 of the return.
Yes.
We're cruising right along now. And let's see, we're just a little befuddled getting started up here.
Yeah, I'm going to get something on the computer, so pardon my looking down.
Alrighty.
All right.
And let's see, so what the plan for tonight is primarily to focus on, though not exclusively on, some of the particulars about what makes Cambridge special in terms of elections. We certainly don't want to only be obsessing on elections, but
Right.
It is only 2 weeks until Election Day, so there's still some appropriateness in having some focus on such matters. Now, so we'll just have to put that right here, sort of be doing that.
All right.
So yeah, we're going to have the shows here tonight. We'll also next week we'll have a couple of shows, and then Tuesday, November 3rd will be Election Day, where we'll be doing with CCTV live broadcast of the election returns, which I believe Susanna Sagat has agreed to do.
Oh, good.
So so we'll be
All
sort
right.
of back as we've been in the past. Before sort of I want to primarily focus a little bit tonight on proportional representation elections and candidate slates and things such as that. But let's see, before diving into that, are there any particular things that we should...
About what's been happening? Or
just sort of updates, general things.
Let's see. I did want to say that the Cambridge High School, the Cambridge French and Latin crew team, the boys and the girls did really well at the Head of the Charles. Best time ever for the program, and so congratulations to the CRLS rowing program. CRLSrowing.com.
Alrighty.
Other than that, I'm trying to get our computer to work here, and it's not showing up. Oh, does it? You think we should press back up normal?
I don't know. I'm a little confused here now.
Because I have you set up here, but it's not showing up.
All right.
So I'm wondering if there's, see how that we're not getting.
What's the URL here?
That's yours. RobertWinters.com.
That's not it. rwinters.com.
Ah, that's why. See that? All right.
All right.
Okay.
All right. So
you keep talking. And I will get
all right.
this. All right.
I think actually tonight, since this is Tuesday, October 20th. With the elections come up, there are a series of candidate forums. I'm not going to give you the big list, but later tonight, from 6:30 to 9 or 9:30, if I'm not mistaken, they'll be having the candidate forum of the Porter Square Neighbors Association. The moderator is Alice Wolf, who has been the moderator in the past as well for that candidate forum, and the timekeeper is Susanna Sagat.
Oh,
right,
wow.
Which is exactly the role she played in at least the last one, maybe the last two of that one. That's actually that forum is actually one of the ones that I've enjoyed the most. I like the way they choose the questions that they address to the candidates.
Right.
In the general format where they have back-to-back-to-back candidate slates to accommodate the 23 candidates. So I think there are 3 who will not be there. So
yeah, I went to a forum last week, the one on the 15th, and there were only 17. But David Marr was at a superintendent's interview. Yeah. And Leland Chung, I saw him right at the end. But I only counted 17, so I don't know. Oh, the 2, yeah. So
honestly, with 23 candidates, if we lose a few, it actually makes things a little nicer.
It made it
sometimes.
A little easier, yeah.
Yeah. All right, so
now where
actually, if you go up to the top of the page,
okay.
All right, just sort of get things ready at the very, very top of the page. If you click Inside Out here,
there we go.
And then if you just sort of right where it says Index at the top, we have to do this a little kind of cheesy here, but
all right, where's the index?
Just to get up the very top, just right up in the URL bar, where it says Index.
Yeah, it says Index already.
Yeah, so just highlight that and cover it up because you want to put in. No, not the whole thing, just where it says Index.
Highlight the index?
Yes, just that, and replace that with, and just get rid of the HTML, everything in there. But
why don't I just do this?
Okay.
Okay.
All right, just put in 2015 OCT 20 for October 20th, and then just hit return.
20.
That should do it. Yeah. Okay, good.
Ah,
All right.
yes.
Well, we just had to queue up some things here because we're going to get into some particulars.
I hit that.
And
right, or
we'll
you
sort of
hit
go
that,
over
yeah.
to do the computer end of things. So again, we do one thing that distinguishes Cambridge from pretty much every place else in the United States, though not every place in the United States.
Yeah.
It's the use of ranked choice ballots.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for the longest time, I mean, back in the, there are various cities around this country and originally came over from England who used ranked choice ballots, sometimes called the alternative vote, going back into the 1830s. I think it was popularized in the 1840s and popularized by, people referred to it because one of the principal people was a fellow named Thomas Hare, and people for years referred to the whole system as the Hare system.
The Hare's
H-A-R-E.
Okay.
Yeah. It became very much popularized by John Stuart Mill, who was well known in the 1800s. And there were other people who actually helped along. And the notion about having election systems that assured some degree of minority representation, and back then minority was primarily referred to political minorities. So if you were in England and you had, the Liberals versus the Labour Party or the, Conservatives, people were very much concerned that you would have a parliament formed where you had, an overwhelming majority of one party that would not be proportional to the actual population. So there was a lot of strong feeling that a good governmental reform should include election systems that were somewhat more proportional. All right. Now that got brought over to America. There were some early adopters. I think Harvard University did some proportional representation in some of its internal elections. And then what happened really was there was a kind of an age of reform in the late 1800s, early 1900s that led to basically even in the Robert's Rules of Order book where they had some preferred methods for doing elections, they started to more and more include things like proportional methods and ranked choice voting in order to make decisions. The field is actually part of economics. If you want to actually find out more about election methods, the best place to look is actually economics textbooks. Yeah, usually in the back chapters after all the good stuff, right? So what happened was there were places across the United States, in Colorado, Ohio, Massachusetts, New York City, which at one time or another actually adopted proportional representation elections.
And when was this again?
This was
100 years ago, or?
What I think in terms of in America, it tended to be somewhere around the 1920s, 1930s.
Right.
And so people, especially academic people, certainly became aware of it. And by the time it was in the deep part of the Depression here in everywhere, including Cambridge, that's when there was a first move to try and adopt an election system. Now, in order to do that, you actually had to petition the legislature to allow for the possibility. Now, from the 1920s until 1938, there were 4 charters that cities could adopt. They were called Plans A, B, C, and D. So that include, strong mayor system. There was, a variety of methods, but there was none that involved a proportional representation. So essentially, you took Plan D with proportional representation.
So
elections.
2 separate things.
Well, the thing is, they boiled them together to be a single new charter form called the Plan E Charter. So in 1938, the state legislature agreed to allow for a 5th option. And of course, every city and town would have to adopt it on their own, and Cambridge put it on the ballot, or some citizens of Cambridge put it on the ballot in 1938. It did not pass. Initially, people said, what's this crazy system?
Right.
But by 1940, when the city was in dire straits, couldn't pass a budget.
It sounds like today's Congress.
Really?
Yeah.
But there was a move to make a transition toward city manager form of government, and the petitioners also chose the planning option. Honestly, they were the same people who had petitioned the legislature to create the option. So it went up to the ballot in the 1940 election, and this time the voters of Cambridge clearly approved the adoption
So they
of
had
the planning
had a
charter.
mayor system before that,
It had a strong mayor. Yes,
Uh-huh.
it was very much a strong mayor for years, directly elected mayor. So it was controversial. It remained controversial. There were attempts to sort of turn it back, but it was adopted in the 1940 election, and it went into place for the 1940 in time for the 1941 municipal elections.
Wow.
Right. So that's kind of how long we've had it. And, and over the years, what happened was various cities and towns, for a number of reasons, oftentimes the tale gets kind of distorted in the telling, but for a variety of reasons, either the wrong people got elected. I think in New York City it was said that it was when 2 communists were elected in the 1930s to the city council. People say, what kind of crazy system is this? Of course, in the 1930s,
a lot of people were communists, right?
Right, in the midst of the Depression, it's actually
true.
the fact that you got 2 out of 13 people were communists was not particularly shocking, and 2 out of 13 hardly constitutes a majority.
Right, exactly. That's interesting.
The irony is that it was then put on a ballot to get rid of it because of this crazy system, and by the time it was actually put to a vote, there were 0 communists on the council.
But they got rid of it.
But they still got rid of it.
So,
and there were a variety of reasons why in Cleveland, in Ohio, or Medford, I think Medford, Massachusetts had it.
So there's nobody left?
Well, for the longest time, it was... no. But for the longest time, what happened was it kind of whittled down. So Cambridge, Massachusetts was really the only city in America left with ranked choice voting. And, we sort of held on. I've often referred to myself as the junkyard dog of PR voting in Cambridge, to hold on to it. And what then happened, especially after the Gore-Bush fiasco in Florida, people started becoming interested again in election systems. Election methods.
Because of the electoral college versus popular vote, everyone got interested in looking at how we vote.
And people were just open to new thoughts, whereas previous they just said, well, it's just an election. The guy with the most votes wins. See ya.
So did anything change across the country after that?
What happened was there was a group called Center for Voting and Democracy, which eventually renamed itself Fair Vote, became sort of the chief advocate around the country for alternate election systems, not necessarily the type we would use in Cambridge, but certainly ranked choice voting, if only for the election of single seats. So like a mayor, if you had 5 candidates running for mayor, rather than have just the person with the most votes, which might be a very low number, become mayor, you would have a series of runoffs using a system similar to what we use here. I think many people consider it fair. In fact, actually, just sort of show you its timing, if you hit that very first, we can sort of,
let's see, we
can just hit, here we're going to go to the computer here.
Wait, we already got the preview.
Right, we've got to choose that, and then, all right, we're having a hard time with the machines here again today.
Right, so preview.
There we go. Okay.
I just had to hit that.
All righty.
There we go. So what are we looking at here?
So
Robert?
if you look over there at the very top link, which says ranked choice voting to be headed for the ballot, I just sort of figured I'd just throw that in there just as a little illustration of the fact.
You want me to hit that?
Yeah, I want you to click on that
I read that today, actually.
Right?
That was quite interesting.
So the thing is that just as a little indication of the fact that it's not just Cambridge. Places like San Francisco, Minneapolis, Minnesota, Portland, Maine, I said San Francisco, I think Oakland, California now, and a number of other places around the country are certainly looking at this thing that was really Cambridge's own for the longest time. And apparently the ballot signatures in Maine were delivered today to put this on the ballot, and it apparently has sufficient support that ranked choice voting may very well...
Yeah, but it says not till November 2016.
Oh yeah, well, the thing is you have to first get it on the ballot, approve it, and then sort of move toward that.
But that's pretty exciting,
All right.
So should we go back?
Yeah, we can go back here a little bit. Actually, I'm going to sort of try and go do this. All right, so you just hit that. There we go.
Okay, there.
All right, we're not exactly tech whizzes here tonight, but we're working on it. So we've had it for the longest time, and I thought maybe one thing it would be sort of worthwhile doing, amongst other things, we can do this in a variety of ways, just talk a little bit about how the method works in Cambridge. Unlike some of these places where it's the purpose is to elect a single person. For a city council race, you basically have, well, for example, this year, 23 candidates vying for 9 seats.
Right.
And we have a system that basically tries to ensure as much fair representation of all players, all interested parties, all basic issues and subgroups of the city's population to the maximum degree possible. It's a sort of I always think of it as sort of a snapshot of it more or less catches the city at a particular time and place. So the way it basically works is, and I'll just sort of say this first, and then we'll sort of go do some more graphics here, is that if, for example, I don't know how many people are going to vote in this year's municipal election, but let's just pretend that we're going to be super optimistic, and approximately 20,000 people came out to vote.
Because last time was
About
17,000.
17,000-ish in that range.
18, yeah.
So that would be a big jump if it were to go up to 20,000. Now, you want to elect 9 people. So the way it works out is that if you wanted to have some fair representation, the easiest thing you might think is you take 1/9 of all the ballots to elect somebody, right? There are some particular problems with that, are kind of technical. So, but if it turns out that if you just took 1/10 of all ballots cast, so in the case of 20,000, that would be just 2,000, and just round it up by 1 to 2001, and say, well, as soon as somebody reaches 2001 ballots, they're elected.
They're elected.
Then you could never elect more than 9.
Right. So in other words, they divide by how many votes are.
It's actually 1 more than the number of seats to be filled.
Okay.
Right, and there's some technical reasons for that, but that establishes a number that's known as the quota.
Right.
Right.
To reach that number.
If we had just divided by 9, it would have been called the Hare quota, named for Thomas Hare. But because of this improved version that was introduced by Henry Richmond Droop, the other one is called the Droop Quota.
Oh boy.
So we use the Droop Quota. Now, the best way to understand the quota is not, though it is true that once you achieve that many ballots, you are elected.
Yeah.
It's probably not the best way to think about it. It's really the purpose of the quota is to ensure proportional representation. So it's really the maximum number of ballots you're allowed to keep. A winning candidate is allowed to keep.
Right. You can't just, hey, I've got all of them and forget.
Yeah. If you had an enormously popular candidate, who just was, if he or she was able to keep all their ballots, then in fact, that whatever constituency elected that candidate might, if they were entitled to 2 or 3 seats, they might only get 1 seat because they were all lumped on the one candidate.
Okay.
See, so the idea is you want to sort of change that so that you can get your fair amount of representation. So elect multiple people, multiple seats, if in fact that's what you properly deserve. Now, explaining how you does this process is where sort of where things gets a little dicey.
And where people get confused.
And people get a little confused.
They put X's instead of numbers.
Yeah.
Right?
So I'm going to, maybe we'll just sort of do one more sort of shot back at the,
all right.
So I think we go this, and here we go here.
What are we looking at here?
All right. So what I'm going to do here is, perhaps what we can do is actually go through the graphical way of understanding this right away. The specific numbers are a little bit less important.
Okay.
But if you just click on where it says graphs of Cambridge City Council here, I'm going to see if we can actually do this graphically. All right. Now I don't know how visible that is, but it should be reasonably visible.
This is 2013.
Yeah. So we're actually taking the
right?
2013 election.
Right.
Now in that election, I think the election quota was somewhere in the vicinity of
1775.
I think it was 1775.
Yeah.
And if you look at that, and this is actually pretty typical of many elections in Cambridge from 1941 until now, there would only be 1 or 2 extraordinarily popular candidates.
That got the number 1 vote.
Yeah, who would actually, on the very, very first count, so just so people can understand what we're looking at here, is that when the ballots are first distributed, they are basically assigned to the candidates based on their first preference, right? And as you see in this, in the 2013 City Council election, Leland Chung did extraordinarily well. So he had way in excess of 1775 ballots, which is the maximum he's permitted to keep. All right, he actually had about 616 or 617 extra ballots to give back. Now, the question is, how do you actually do that giving back? So I think for this, I actually have to sort of say it a little bit.
Okay.
It's going to seem a little kind of goofy, but this is actually something I've been sort of wanting to do for a while.
Oh, yeah, we're talking about this.
Okay.
Cards. How are you going to do this?
All right, so let's just
All right.
pretend this deck of cards here
Okay.
was all of Leland Chung's ballots in 2013,
Okay.
and that the quota was such that he was only allowed to keep
That many.
this many. So here's the hard part. This is the part that everybody gets
Right.
upset by.
Yeah.
If I have to take this many and reduce it to that many, how do I do it?
Right.
Now, back from 1941 to 1971, it was done a particular way. However the ballots were first collected, which was somewhat random, you basically just took them off the top, and that was it. So he kept the bottom, and then the rest, you took the rest of those ballots, you turned and you looked at them and you said, oh, who's the second choice, and you distribute them to the other candidates based on the next available preference for a continuing candidate.
So you didn't mix them up.
You didn't shuffle the cards. You just sort of
Okay.
took them right off the top. Now the problem with that is that only the ones that were piled on last were the ones that would be
Right.
transferred to other candidates. People thought, well, that's kind of biased, and it is. In fact, how these ballots were originally stacked is based on something called the random draw of precincts, which actually takes place tomorrow, the 21st at 5:30.
So how is that unfair if it's a random draw anyway?
It's not a question of fairness, but the
Okay.
thing is that since they do the random draw a week or two before the election,
Yeah.
then if you happen to know which precincts were the ones who are going to be at the top of the pile, you might start
It's
campaigning
random but
extra.
public. Oh,
Yeah, but it's public,
yeah. It
public
shouldn't be public
information.
then.
So they said, okay, we're not going to do that. Now, the
Yeah.
1938 law said that you can use any system that was in place in the time of passage of the law, which was 1938, based on whatever city. So the method that Cambridge was using was called the Boulder Method because it was what was in place in Boulder, Colorado at the
Wow.
time. So in 1973, they said, let's do it a different way. We're actually going to use the method that was in use in the city of Cincinnati. So it's called the Cincinnati Method. Now, people just refer to the Cincinnati
Yeah,
Method,
yeah,
but that's why it's called the Cincinnati
Okay.
Method.
And
So
what did they
Cincinnati
do?
is.
What was different?
What they did is they said, all right, we need to take this many cards out of the deck. So what we're going to do is we're just going to put this in here. And if, let's just say there was 200 ballots to be removed, and there were about 2,200 ballots, let's say there were 2,200 ballots total, and you had to pluck 200. You say, well, let's see, if we just do the 2,200 divided by the 200, we get 11. So they say, let's just take the 11th ballot out.
So every
So
11th.
So they actually go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Take the 11th, give it to another candidate. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10. Take
Okay.
the 11th, give it to another candidate. And they would just do that. And the advantage of that was that it would enable you to get more of a random draw across all precincts of the city.
That
So
makes
there was-
sense.
It does make sense. There's only one problem.
Ah.
The problem is that if you were to just do one thing like this, like somebody said, well, somebody demands a recount,
Yeah.
and they said, and they found
how
an
did you
extra
find it?
ballot.
Oh,
Well,
yeah.
all it takes is one extra card thrown under here, and then you're pulling a completely different
Oh,
group out.
gosh.
So there's this sort of instability associated with Cincinnati. Now there is a better method. There's a better method, and we'll show you some more charts and graphs in this and the next half hour, which is basically you say, okay, I'll tell you what, instead of cutting it this way, what we'll do is we'll take all of the ballots, and what we'll do is we'll say if somebody's entitled to 10 11ths to keep, and 1 out of 11 to take away, what we're going to do is we're going to basically cut it here and take 1 11th of all ballots, and so you have to use weights, and transfer that weight to each of the continuing candidates. This way it's completely independent of the ordering of the ballots. And there's other aspects to this as well.
I'm totally confused.
It is a little
You know,
confusing, but that's referred
But
to.
a computer does this now.
The computer doesn't. So that's referred to as a fractional transfer method.
Fraction, and that's what we're using now.
Yeah, it's actually the default option in the software that Cambridge uses, but we
Okay.
actually have to override it in order to embrace the Cambridge rules, which are required by law, the 1938 law, unless we adopt another system. And fractional transfer, as far as I was able to tell, and believe me, I looked,
Yeah.
was not in place anywhere in the United States in the year 1938.
So.
If it was, the Cambridge Election Commission could just say, let's
Okay.
adopt it. done.
So, in your opinion, is that fair? Or
It
is
would be
there-
fairer, I think, ultimately. A little more complicated, but ultimately fairer. And in fact, what you could do in that case, you could just take all the ballots and you can just rearrange them any way you want.
To me, that's what makes most sense. Then you're not worrying about which precinct it's from or which. I mean, to me, then it's really truly random.
Yes. It's actually not random. It's absolutely repeatable. So the thing is, if you rearrange the cards, do anything here, you get exactly the same election results every time. The one part about the Cambridge election system that I think people find most problematic is the fact that if you counted the ballots in a slightly different way, you'd be getting a different draw of transferable ballots.
Right.
And you might get a small, but sometimes pivotal change in the election. I mean, in the last election,
It was so close that
there was a
that
13
really
vote
matters.
margin,
I
so
know.
there was a demand for the recount. And, perhaps part of the motivation for asking for a recount was because if you did, maybe you'd actually get a different set of ballots and you get a
But
more
so the computer can go back to that original count? Is that what it did? I mean, for the recount, how did it remember?
well, the
what
computer, no, for the recount, you couldn't use the computer the way we do it right
Oh.
now, so they had to do it by hand, and it took 2 weeks, and it was very expensive.
But it came out pretty close to the
It
I
came
guess,
out
what-
within a few ballots of the, I think
of
the original.
finding.
Yeah, I mean, they'd find a few ballots that they could count that they weren't able to find by machine. So in the end, we're actually down to our last 20
Yeah.
seconds here.
This is very interesting. I'd like to continue this.
Yeah, we'll certainly continue it. But in the end, the margin of victory or the election result went from 13 to 20, but it was
Okay,
other than
so-
that, no change.
Which is, I
So,
guess, somewhat reassuring. Okay.
Cenicienta encontró un amigo